A submarine receives an order beneath the ocean, without surfacing, transmitting, or telling shore it heard a thing. The signal is radio. The ocean should kill it. It doesn't, and that changes everything. That is not a movie trick. It is the real problem every submarine force has to solve. How do you reach a boat that is safest when nobody can prove it is there? A decision is made on land. The new instruction has to reach a submarine hundreds of miles away, submerged, deliberately hard to find, and under no circumstances eager to advertise its position. Every obvious answer fails. Call it? It cannot answer from deep underwater. Use a satellite? That can require the boat to come close enough to the surface to use an antenna. Ask for a quick acknowledgement? That creates the one thing the submarine has spent its entire patrol avoiding, a clue. So it listens to radio. It does not call home. It does not have a conversation. It does not send back a little digital receipt saying, "Message received." And from shore, nobody may know for certain whether the message has been heard. In normal life, that would be a terrible communication system. Underwater, it is part of what keeps the boat alive. To see why, start with the basic problem. Seawater is brutal on radio. Radio works beautifully in air. It is why a signal from a tower can reach a car on the highway, why aircraft can talk across vast distances, why a satellite can send a picture to your phone from orbit. Then that same signal hits saltwater, and the rules change. Seawater is conductive. It is full of ions. To a normal radio signal, it is not open space. It is resistance. Energy is stripped away as the wave tries to force its way through. The higher the frequency, the faster the ocean wins. That is why you cannot take a regular radio, dive to the bottom of a lake, and keep chatting with somebody on shore. The signal does not politely weaken. It disappears quickly enough to make the whole idea useless. For a submarine, that sounds like the end of the story. It is not. Because although water is hostile to radio, it is not equally hostile to every kind of radio. If you slow the wave down, far down, something changes. The signal still loses strength. The ocean still has the advantage. But at very low frequencies, a radio wave can push some distance into the water rather than dying right at the surface. That small exception became one of the most important communications tricks in naval history. Very low frequency radio, or VLF, is not the kind of radio most people ever think about. It is slow by modern standards, painfully slow. The amount of information it can carry is tiny compared with what even an old smartphone moves in a second. But speed is not the mission. A submarine does not need a movie download. It does not need a FaceTime call. In the moment that matters, it may only need a warning, a short set of instructions, or an indication that something more important is waiting. If that message can reach the boat while it remains underwater and silent, it is worth more than all the bandwidth in the world. The price is enormous infrastructure. A VLF station is not a little antenna on a building. The waves are so long that the transmitting systems become huge. On land, that means vast antenna fields, tall towers, long runs of wire, serious power, and a site that has one very unusual job. Speak loudly enough for a submarine to hear a whisper of it through the ocean. The shore station can afford to be obvious. It is not hiding. It sits on friendly ground, backed by generators, engineers, security, and an entire country. The submarine gets to be small, mobile, and quiet. That division of labor is the heart of the system. The shore does the shouting, the submarine does the listening. But how does the boat listen without raising something out of the water like a flag? Historically, one answer was a trailing wire antenna, often called a wire streamer. The submarine pays out a long, thin wire behind it as it moves. It is a plain, almost old-fashioned solution to a very modern problem. The wire is not there to transmit. It is there to collect enough of that faint, low-frequency energy to make the broadcast useful. There is something elegant about it. Somewhere, perhaps half a world away, a station is sending a signal with the power and scale of a national utility. Deep below, a submarine is dragging a length of wire through dark water, listening for it. No handshake, no greeting, no "how are you?" Just a broadcast and a receiver. That apparent simplicity is part of the protection. The shore station is not trying to place a call to one particular submarine. It is sending a steady stream into a very large piece of ocean. The boat does not announce itself to join. It is either there to hear it, or it is not. That makes the broadcast feel almost impersonal, and deliberately so. A personal call invites a response. A broad transmission does not. The signal can be repeated on schedule, mixed into a larger flow of traffic, and heard only by receivers that are supposed to be listening. To anyone else, it may be nothing more than an odd, persistent sound on the edge of the radio spectrum. For the crew, though, that faint traffic matters. It is a reminder that the submarine has not been cut loose from the country that sent it out. It is still connected, just not in a way that looks familiar from land. And that brings us to another piece people often get wrong. A submarine does not stay at the deepest part of the ocean and receive anything it wants whenever it wants. Water is still water. Every extra foot between the signal and the antenna makes reception harder. The boat may need to come to a shallower operating depth to receive a low-frequency broadcast clearly enough. That does not mean it has to break the surface. It does not mean it suddenly becomes easy to spot. But it is a compromise, and submariners treat compromises seriously. The captain is always balancing two things that fight each other: connection and concealment. Stay deeper, and you are harder to reach. Move shallower, and you are easier to reach, but you have given the ocean a little less distance to hide you behind. That is the entire game. There is no magic point where the submarine gets perfect communications with zero exposure. There are only choices, each one carrying a different kind of risk. This is also why the obvious alternative, simply bringing an antenna closer to the surface, does not make the problem disappear. The closer a boat comes to the surface, the more it has to think about everything happening there. Weather, shipping, aircraft, sensors, and the simple fact that the surface is where the rest of the world lives. A communication window may be necessary, but it is never casual. That is the difference between a submarine and a ship. A ship expects to be seen. A submarine spends much of its life avoiding that expectation. Even a small decision to improve reception has to be weighed against the job of remaining unknown. The VLF broadcast is designed for that reality. It is not a personal phone call directed at one boat. It is a broadcast. The station transmits a stream of messages over a large area, and submarines that can receive it listen in. Think of an old AM radio station late at night. It does not know who is listening. It does not need to. It puts the signal out into the darkness, and anyone with the right receiver can hear it. The difference is that a submarine broadcast is encrypted, authenticated, tightly controlled, and built for people who cannot safely answer. That last part matters more than it may seem. Suppose you are the officer ashore responsible for getting a message to a submarine. You send the broadcast. The signal races out through the antenna system, across the sea, and into the water. Then what? You wait. You do not get a read receipt. You do not get a confirmation tone. You do not know whether the boat was at the right depth, whether it had its antenna deployed, or whether the message reached it cleanly at that moment. That uncertainty is not an accident. It is the price of keeping the submarine from having to speak. The system deals with that uncertainty through repetition, schedules, redundancy, and procedure. The broadcast can be transmitted again. The boat knows when to listen. Its crew knows how to handle the information if it arrives. And the submarine is expected to operate independently during periods when communications are limited or absent. That is a very different mindset from the connected world we live in. We have been trained to think no signal means failure. On a submarine, no outgoing signal may mean everything is going exactly as planned. That creates a strange burden for the people ashore. They have to build a system that does not panic when the boat says nothing. The absence of a reply cannot automatically be treated as bad news. It may mean the submarine never heard the traffic. It may mean it heard it and continued in silence. It may mean the boat is exactly where it should be, doing exactly what it was sent out to do. That is why the communications plan cannot be the whole mission plan. A submarine has to be prepared to operate through silence. It needs standing instructions, disciplined crews, and a command structure designed around the fact that the ocean can interrupt even the best connection. The message matters, but the ability to continue without it matters too. Of course, no crew can act on every mysterious pulse it picks up from the sea. The message must be trusted before it matters. That is where encryption and authentication come in. The broadcast itself may be detectable by other countries. A powerful radio transmission is not invisible. But hearing a signal and understanding a message are two completely different things. The content is protected. The intended receiver has the means to determine whether the traffic is genuine. A false message is worse than no message, so the system is designed to make forgery and tampering extraordinarily difficult. The submarine is silent, but it is not blind. It is not taking instructions from a stranger calling through the fog. It is receiving an authenticated message from its own chain of command. That distinction is easy to miss because encryption is invisible when it works. The viewer sees a signal arrive and assumes the hard part is over. For the people operating the system, the hard part is making sure the signal means exactly what it claims to mean. A submarine cannot afford guesswork. It cannot take a vague or questionable transmission and ask the sender to clarify. It cannot casually expose itself to settle an argument. The message must arrive in a form that trained operators can verify before it has any authority. In a world of silence, certainty has to be built into the message itself. That is one reason the entire arrangement is so carefully disciplined. The shore station provides reach. The antenna provides a chance to hear. The secure system provides trust. Remove any one of those pieces and the message becomes less useful, or potentially dangerous. Now, VLF is useful, but it still has limits. It reaches only so far into the water, it carries only so much information, and there are moments when even a modest improvement in underwater reach could matter. That led engineers to an even stranger idea. What if you slowed the radio down again? Not a little, dramatically. This is where extremely low frequency, ELF, enters the story. ELF was the extreme answer to the underwater radio problem. It used frequencies so low that the resulting signals were almost comically slow. You could not use them for a conversation. You could not use them to send a detailed operational plan. You could not use them for anything resembling normal data traffic. What you could do was ring a bell. That phrase, bell ringer, captures the idea perfectly. An ELF signal could act as an alert to a submarine. There is traffic for you. Change your reception posture. Listen for more. It was not meant to carry the whole message. It was meant to start the next step. That may sound underwhelming, but it solves a profound problem. In submarine communications, the first challenge is often not delivering every detail. It is making sure the boat knows it needs to make itself reachable, without forcing it to surface or transmit. A short alert can change the entire situation. The submarine receives it at a depth where ordinary radio would have failed. The crew understands that something may be waiting. Then the boat can make a careful decision about how to receive the fuller message through a more capable channel. It is like knocking on the door of a house during a storm. You do not have to conduct the whole conversation from the driveway. You only need the person inside to know someone is there. ELF made that possible, at least in a limited sense. But the cost was staggering. The antennas and infrastructure needed for such low frequencies were immense. The data rate was tiny. The system was expensive, specialized, and hard to justify except for the narrowest and most serious missions. That is why the history of submarine communications is full of systems that look almost absurd until you remember the problem they were built to solve. A giant antenna field to send a few bits of information, a long wire trailing behind a multi-million-dollar submarine, a shore command center that may send a crucial message and never hear a word back. Taken separately, each part seems strange. Taken together, they make perfect sense. The Cold War gave this problem a special urgency. Naval planners had to assume that, in the worst possible moment, the normal communications paths could be unreliable, delayed, watched, or unavailable. A system that could send even a minimal alert to a submerged submarine had value precisely because it was built for the moment when ordinary solutions were no longer good enough. That is the real logic behind the giant antennas and the painfully slow data rates. They were not designed for convenience. They were designed for the bad day. For the day when the ability to reach a boat once could matter more than the ability to reach it quickly every hour. The submarine survives by being hard to locate. Any system that demands constant replies works against that purpose. So communications must flow toward the boat more often than they flow away from it. The boat is allowed to receive. It is cautious about transmitting. That is the logic behind the one-way broadcast. It is also why submarine communication is never just one technology. VLF and historical ELF systems are part of a larger toolbox. Aircraft have been used to relay low-frequency signals. Satellites provide powerful options when a submarine can safely use them. Different antennas and different bands serve different needs, but every option comes back to the same question. How much information do you need right now, and how much risk are you willing to accept to get it? If the answer is, we only need to tell the boat to listen, then a low-frequency signal may be enough. If the answer is, we need a larger message, the boat may take a carefully managed reception window. If the answer is, we need to speak from the submarine, then the stakes change again, because now the boat is no longer just listening. It is creating something an adversary may be able to notice. That is why submariners tend to treat communications with such seriousness. A message is not just information. It can shape where the submarine goes, how it moves, what depth it chooses, and how much of its invisibility it is willing to trade for contact. The remarkable thing is how little drama it may have on the inside. There may be no alarm blaring through the boat, no booming voice from headquarters, no cinematic moment where every sailor freezes in place. There may only be a faint signal captured by a receiver, processed by secure equipment, checked by trained people, and passed up the chain. Then, the submarine keeps moving. From the outside, the ocean looks empty. No one on the surface knows a message has arrived. No one has seen an antenna. No one has heard a reply. The boat has changed its understanding of the mission without changing the way it looks to the rest of the world. That is the real achievement. Radio has not defeated the ocean. The ocean still sets the terms. It weakens the signal, limits the depth, forces the system to be slow, and turns every contact into a trade-off. But low frequencies bend those terms just enough. They create a narrow, reliable path from shore to submarine, a path that can carry an alert, a short message, or the beginning of something bigger. And because the path is one way, the submarine can hear the order without answering it. There is a final irony in that. The more sophisticated the communication system becomes, the less it should ask of the submarine itself. The shore station grows larger, the receivers grow smarter, the message becomes more secure. Also, the boat can do the simplest thing imaginable: remain quiet long enough to listen. That is the paradox behind underwater radio. The most important message on a submarine may arrive in complete silence. The boat hears it. The shore may never know exactly when. And the fact that no reply comes back is not proof the system failed. It may be proof that the submarine is still doing the one thing it was built to do: remain out there, unseen,